Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to another episode. Today, I want to talk a little bit about runes, and I want to share a little story about kind of a divinatory moment that I had with them, to give you at least also a little clue as to kind of what my magic looks like in particular, and maybe you'll be able to glean something from this story too. Okay, so let's rewind some time. This was still back in like depth of winter in Colorado. And of course, the norm, having a really rough day. One of those days where my chest felt incredibly heavy. Hope isn't even on my radar, let alone a small spark, And I was just having a really hard time just existing. That was kind of my perpetual state last winter. And so I didn't have a car at the time. So luckily at that point, I think I had enough wherewithal to be like, Cole, to my partner, I need the car. I need the car for one day, or at least a morning, please God. And so I was able to negotiate like a morning with the car so I could drive into the mountains. And so that's what I ended up doing. And I think on that day, it ended up being like, I think in the shade, maybe 10 degrees. And I'm a person who loves winter. I love hiking and being outside in the wintertime. Even like I've been known to go on walks when it's negative degrees. But the only thing that makes me hesitant about like something like this is that I'm also not prepared. Like I don't have grippy shoes. I don't have snow stuff. I'm like an asshole city person in that I go hiking with nothing to like actually help me if I was in trouble. So anyways, so I went to one of my regular spots that's actually usually incredibly popular because it's a really easy hike, but also it has a pretty big stream. Probably a creek, technically a creek at that point, going through it. So I went there when the sun was just rising, so still pretty cold. And still feeling that super heaviness. Just like the only way I can explain it is it feels like my lungs are made of concrete. And it just like pumps concrete through my veins. And so I went there and I got all bundled up and I had my backpack and when I go on hikes, regardless of how I feel, I usually call in my deities. And usually I call Odin and Hades by name, but that time, for some reason, I called in whoever wanted to come. Like, please, just show up and help me, please. And all of my normal crew, so Odin, Hades, and Freya, but Loki showed up this time, who shows up occasionally for me. We don't have a super tight relationship, but we kind of have that like I have this with several gods and goddesses that are like typically deemed more like dark and death oriented. Like I have this with like Santa Muerte and Hecate too, but they're all deities that like if they were across the room, I'd like tip my hat at them and they'd tip their hat at me and then we'd like continue on. Like I love them so much, but we just don't work with each other, or we've worked in like adjacent spaces with each other. Anyways, so Loki was there, and so I didn't really think anything of it. I was just like, okay, let's go. Let's just walk. Usually when I call up deities, that's how I envision it, is just like, let's be in this space together. I don't call them up for any like particular purpose. I think technically in my head, I kind of think of it more of like a soul retrieval, which I'll go into another episode. I want to do in a whole podcast on soul retrievals and soul loss, but I use hikes and being in nature as a chance to like unite myself or reunite myself, to call everything that is not of me to leave my body, and to call everything that is like gone elsewhere to tell it to come back. That's kind of the basic premise. So when I call deities in, it's usually with that in mind of just like, I just need to reground, to reassemble myself. So they're present for that. So I'm walking along this trail and there's this amazing creek. And I see that it's mostly frozen over. And I'm like, oh, so beautiful. I take photos of the cracked ice, and I sit at this little area for a little while. I just enjoy the morning. And yes, it's freezing cold, but it's just so beautiful. There's still snow everywhere. A lot of coniferous trees. Why did that feel weird to say? No, coniferous, that's correct. A lot of pines and spruces. And they're, all the snow is on them, and it's just magical. So I keep walking at some point, and I eventually get to a part where the trail kind of butts up against the creek. And I go over, and I realize that I can stand on the water, on the ice. It's that thick. But what's super cool is that the flow of the creek is so fast that there are sections that, like, there are holes, huge holes in the creek that have just rushing water through them. So there's these, like, it's basically all flat, and then just little holes with just like rapids going through them. So I was able to, like, sit down on the ice right next to one of those rapids. And I sat there for a good while and just was starting to reflect of, like, what do I do? How do I get out of this? Like, how do I feel alive again? Because really, that's, like, so many people talk about depression, it's not that we don't want to live. It's that we want to feel alive, It's the opposite of what people normally think. And so I was just kind of in this mindset, and Loki sits next to me. And like I said before, like, I don't physically see this. It's kind of like a knowledge that I have in my head. He sits next to me, and he just whispers two runes. He says Laguz and Isa. And Laguz is the rune of flow, of water. And Isa is the rune of ice, of stillness. And, similar with tarot cards. Those are the quick and dirty definitions of those runes, right? But knowing, kind of having the experience that I do with runes, and I'm not an authority by any means. I'm actually still learning them pretty diligently, and I still consider myself a beginner, but the thing I love the most about them is they are so multifaceted and so storied. It's not just a symbol, it's a whole legend and story and situation and feeling behind it. So when Loki whispered me those runes, I kind of immediately understood what he was saying. Isa, ice, is this rune of stillness. It's the rune of winter, of a lack of movement as a chance to rest, to be still, to listen. It is kind of that moment after a fresh snow where you walk outside and everything's silent. It's restorative, but it can also be harmful. There's very much a double element there. And so here we have Isa, stillness. And then we have Laguz, which is flow. And very much, that one's a pretty easy one. Like, it's the idea of going where water takes you, that the flow of water or the flow of energy or the flow of something provides you with the easiest route to go. It is persistent, it is strong, it can, unravel rock, And so these two things were right next to each other. And I was actively sitting in this scenario of Isa sitting on this ice that's really sturdy and thick and still. And then there were these moments where the flow was so intense that ice couldn't even form because it just had to flow. The pressure was too great, right? And so I guess it just, like, clicked. It was one of those things where I understood really quickly of, like, oh, I am in a moment of Isa, of winter. And I am standing still. I am resting. I am allowing things to be quiet. I am allowing myself to get blanketed, you know? And the way that and hold on, back step, going ahead of myself. And that stillness is incredibly strong. It's so strong that I was able to sit on it. I was able to sit on this like fluid thing because it was still, it was frozen, right? And the way that you get through winter, or the way that things thaw out, is that the ice breaks in places where the flow is strong. The flow is strong. So I was trying to think of like, okay, what are things that I have to do right now where the flow is strong? And so always the answer is writing. I have to write. For me, writing feels like a pressure release valve. It doesn't matter what I write about. It could literally just be like, some days I write stories about knights and kings, and some days I'm like, I feel like shit. My rib cage feels like this. But that's always been something that I like have to do, whether it's for a social media post, whether it's in my journal, it's anywhere. It's just something that I need to do. It's a flow state. At the time, I was really, really getting nourishment from waking up super early before the sun rose. I would put on a YouTube channel that's just a fireplace and like the sounds of a fireplace. And I would read, and more specifically, I was reading a book on plant intelligence that was like really magical, really good. And that felt so beautiful and like liminal to me. Like that was my time where magic was super present. And that was something that really made me feel like I was in flow, because if I started my day with that, I started it in this in a flow state, and it felt really good. And then of course I noticed where there wasn't flow. Like at the time I was streaming a lot, and I was streaming a game that just like wasn't fitting. It just wasn't flowing anymore, and it actually felt really painful, and I would end the streams really drained, and it was just like no flow, man. But then like those two runes, Laguz Isa, I can be both, right? There was both right in front of me. I was, participating in both. And it was this beautiful moment of like sacred permission, of just like, you can be both still and moving, or moving under the ice. People don't need to see it. But if you're feeling really heavy and really tired and really like you're stuck, the way that you can start to thaw is by finding flow. And that could be anything. It could be anything. Very frequently, it's not quote unquote productive in the capitalist sense. But just like, where is it that you just feel as if time flows, or time doesn't matter? Or I know there's one thing I saw in regards to ADHD, and they commented on finding the things where you don't need multiple stimulations in order to complete them. So like, for me, that's writing. I don't need to have a podcast on, or music, or I don't need to be doing something else in order to focus on writing. Cleaning is something where I need to have like 7 things going on at the same time in order to do it. So that's another perspective on that too. But finding that flow, as small as it is, and then slowly you can start to thaw areas of yourself. Eventually spring will come and it'll all be Laguz, right? Or maybe it won't. Maybe you'll still be frozen in places, but that's okay. Like, that is okay. Because there's really beautiful magic in Isa, in that magic. I don't really know what it means that Loki specifically was the one that gave me that information, but like, you know, I'm not gonna question it. I appreciate him quite a lot, and I dig his energy. I like the chaos. But maybe that's something I'll pursue sometime soon, but I don't know. So that's my story. Isa, Laguz, living together. Two sides of the same coin. But I hope that story elucidated something for you, or, you know, spoke to you in some way, or at least taught you about runes. It was something that actually will stick with me for a really long time, I think, because it was a really beautiful gift that I got on that hike, that I'm happy to share with you. So that's my story for today. If you have any questions, or if you have anything that came up for you during this, or if you have anything that you want me to talk a little bit more about, in regards to like anything you might be going through in your own shadow path, you're welcome to email me at lightbringerrituals@gmail.com, or check out my Instagram and message me there. I am at lightbringerrituals there too. I'm starting to come back alive, so that's exciting. At least on social media. I've been alive this whole time, shockingly, but on social media I'm starting to come back alive. But thank you so much for being here. It was lovely seeing you, and I hope you have a great day, week, whatever. Bye!